In this video, we're going to learn how to create a theater of the mind scene, a tactical battle map scene, how to align Foundry's grid to the one on your map, and a bunch of cool customizations that you can make to them. Let's dive in. Let's make the simplest of all scenes first, a theater of the mind scene. We'll start by opening the Scenes tab, pressing the Create Scene button, and giving our scene a name like Sylvaria's Dreaming Tree. This is the scene configuration window. It has tabs for Basics, Grid, Levels, Visibility, Environment, and Miscellaneous. We'll look at the rest of the tabs later, but for normal scenes, you should only really need to worry about the Basics tab. We can see the name we gave our scene at the top. The Show and Navigation checkbox controls whether it's visible in the scene list, and the drop-down controls who can see it. The navigation name is what will appear in the scene list. That way you can have a scene named Sylvaria's Dreaming Tree, but your players would just see it as the Dreaming Tree. Let's add a background image to the scene by uploading our Theater of the Mind image to Foundry. Hit Save Changes, and we can see our image is in the center and has some padding around the edge where we can store tokens, notes, or other things that players can't see. Let's open the configuration window back up and look at the rest of the Basics tab. The background color controls the color of the area around the image. I like to use the eyedropper to get the color of the edge of the map and then drag it down to make it darker for a nice immersive effect, but you can set it to whatever color you want. Since this is a Theater of the Mind scene, we can set the grid to gridless so we won't have any lines over the image. The darkness level can make your scene look darker, and there are a number of atmospheric weather effects as well. We'll go with autumn leaves for this scene. For a Theater of the Mind scene, the last thing we'll want to do is change over to the Visibility tab and uncheck Token Vision. Since we want our players to be able to see this scene without having to place a token on it, we don't need that enabled. Press Save Changes, and we have a pretty great looking scene. We can make it even better with animated lights, but we'll look at those in another video. First, let's take a look at making a tactical battle map scene. Press the Create Scene button and give it a name like Farmhouse. Just like with our Theater of the Mind scene, we can add our battle map using the background image field. I know that my scene has a 200 pixel square grid, so I'll set that, but Foundry has support for hex grids and a gridless option as well. You can change any of the other settings just like we did for our Theater of the Mind scene. Hit Save Changes and you've got a basic battle map scene set up. Just like our Theater of the Mind scene, the image is centered with some padding around the edges. We still need to add walls and lights to the scene to make it work perfectly, but we'll look at that in our next video. What if we didn't know what our grid should be set to? That's where the Gridalignment tool comes in. Let's open our scene configuration window, and we can see how we could figure it out ourselves. The ruler button right next to the grid settings is your Grid Alignment tool. When we press it, the scene configuration window hides itself, and we have the option to control the grid type, image scale, grid size, and an image offset. Let's set it to an incorrect value like 70 and zoom in on the map so we can see the grid more clearly while we make changes. The image scale will make the image bigger or smaller. Since we can see that the Foundry grid is smaller than the one baked into the map, we could scale the image down by changing the value here or by using Shift and scrolling or Shift and the up or down arrow key until it lines up. Generally speaking though, I'd recommend changing the grid size rather than the image scale. Let's try that. The grid size can be adjusted by using Alt and scrolling or the Alt and up or down arrow keys. Once the Foundry grid matches up with your map's baked-in grid, you're good to go. If it looks like things aren't quite lining up, you might need to use the background image offset. It lets you adjust the grid horizontally and vertically just in case the grid in your map doesn't start right at the edge. You can use the arrow keys to adjust it. When you're ready, press Save Changes and your scene is ready to go. Now, there were a lot of tabs that we skipped. That's because to get started, this is really all you need. But if you want to go farther, let's take a look at the rest of those settings so you can get a feel for what other things you can do with your scenes. We've already looked at the Basics tab, so let's look at the Grid tab now. You can control the grid size, type, and access the Grid Alignment tool. You can also control how much distance each grid represents. For example, right now each square represents 5 feet, but if this were a regional map, we could change it to be 10 miles. You can also tweak if the grid is solid lines, dashed, dotted, and more, as well as how thick it is. The grid can also have a different color, and you can make it more or less visible by changing its opacity. If you need to tweak your scene properties, you can change its dimensions to make it smaller or larger, increase or decrease the padding around the scene, and change the offset just like in the Gridalignment tool. Foundry supports multi-level scenes, which is where the Levels tab comes into play. By default, scenes only have one level, but you can add more. We'll look at working with levels in another video. The initial view position field is helpful though. It controls where the scene is when you view or activate it. For example, for a battle map, I might set it to be where the tokens will start. I can zoom in and position things where I want them, press the Capture Current View button, and then when I activate this scene later, everyone's view will start right here. We're going to save most of the visibility tab for our next video, since it's all about vision and fog of war, but since we changed it for the Theater of the Mind scene, I will note that the Token Vision checkbox controls whether you need a token to be placed on the scene to see it or not. For battle maps, you'll typically want this on, and for Theater of the Mind scenes, you'll typically want it off. The Environment tab lets you really start tweaking how your scene looks. There's an explanation for what each slider does, and you can start moving them around to see what impact they'll have on your scene. There is one thing I'd call out though that can be a little confusing. The darkness environment fields only apply when the blend ambience option is checked and when the darkness level of the scene isn't 0. So if I change these while the darkness level is at 0, we won't see any change. If I increase it to 1 though, we can see that the sliders start to make an impact. This makes it so you can make your scene look different as it gets darker. The last tab is our Miscellaneous tab, which contains a grab bag of useful things for your scenes. In the Details group, you can link a relevant journal entry and even a specific page of that journal. Then, when you right-click on the scene, you can access it quickly by clicking on the Scene Notes option. In the Audio group, you can pick a playlist and even a specific sound in that playlist, which will start playing when you activate this scene. In the Transition Animation group, you can choose how Foundry will transition to this scene. There's a number of built-in effects like a fade, morph, glitch, and a lot more. You can press the play button next to the dropdown to see what each option looks like. You can tweak how long the transition takes, and if you only want the transition to occur when you're activating the scene, you can check the Active Only box. That covers everything you need to know to make Theater of the Mind and tactical battle maps in Foundry VTT. In our next video, we're going to look at how to set up dynamic line of sight with walls and lights, as well as the different options you have for fog of war in your scenes.